OpenAI is adopting Anthropic MCP. Well, that's a beginning, right? I mean, OpenAI adopting something that Anthropic has already done rather than creating their own version. And we will take you in detail of how it works as well.
Google also released a new model, and this is the Gemini 2.5 Pro. We'll get into what that is and the details around it as well.
and the viral Ghibli style images are everywhere. The image generation goes native in the GPT-4o model, and we'll show you a few glimpses of that as well.
A couple of other things we'll hit upon. PwC is taking a bite out of the agents and is putting together a cross-platform orchestration in the Agent OS. We'll also talk about how Claude 3.7 Sonnet is coming to Azure Databricks. So there's more additional options for models for how you develop against Gen AI.
Yeah, and finally, Microsoft has launched some deep reasoning and agent flow in the Copilot Studio, as well as some agents in the Microsoft Copilot, and a lot more. Stay tuned for the main episode. Greetings. Welcome to the AI Files podcast. If you're looking to stay up to date on the AI, this is the podcast for you. I'm Shadab Hussain. I'm the director of AI at Microsoft, and I'm your co-host.
Hello, everybody. Jaime Basilico, as you know already. I'm the other co-host here for the AI Files. My day job is a data and AI technical specialist and architect. And as a reminder, please note this is not an official Microsoft channel, so the views and opinions expressed by myself and Shadab are our own and do not represent the views of Microsoft.
Let's start with the quote of the week. And I would say that this would be probably what Sam Altman said. He said, quote, "People love MCP, and we are excited to add support across our products. It's available today in the Agents SDK, and support for the ChatGPT desktop app and responsive API is coming soon." And he announced that on the social media platform. Well, that's quite a news, I would say. It may sound like something very small announcement, but it is not, because this is the first time OpenAI is adopting what Anthropic has already launched, right? And OpenAI has been a leading research lab. They have been actually the master of shipping, right? They have been actually gaining the limelight because they always ship first. Of course, the Anthropic actually has taken some leads in some of the areas, particularly, like they were the first one to launch the artifacts. They were also the first one to launch the agents and the computer use, and a couple of other things. And they also did MCP, which is basically a new framework to actually it's a new protocol to actually let you draw from the data sources, right? It's called Model Context Protocol, and Jamie is going to talk a lot more in detail about that. But I think it's a new beginning, right? It's probably where the new protocols, frameworks are emerging, and the companies who are like really now arch rival are beginning to probably adopt each other's standards. So next move, Anthropic. We'll see if Anthropic adopts something from OpenAI or if the others also follow suit. But this is, I think, a good news because, and as Anthropic Chief Product Officer responded, Mike Krieger, he said, "Excited to see the MCP love spread to OpenAI. Welcome." By the way, Anthropic is mostly a bunch of folks who actually spun off from the OpenAI. So, there's a lot of close collaboration between them in the sense that, the OpenAI folks joined. A lot of OpenAI folks actually started Anthropic. So, they have that connection, but they, of course, spun off because of the differences. And that's why they were always competing against each other. But this is a good beginning.
Yeah, the way I'm going to oversimplify something in terms of what this means, and this is just my personal view. If you can't beat them, join them. That's the way I look at this, is that, OpenAI has a platform for agents. This has been basically been being built since the Assistance API, and then they just released the Agent SDK. So they have their own ways of connecting into data. So why do they need to support MCP? Well, there's nothing says that they needed to. I think it's more about market pressure and what's actually happening. And what I mean by what's actually happening is the groundswell around MCP, why so many people are adopting it, what's the impact of that? And again, I go back to, if OpenAI didn't support this, would that mean that there would be more people defecting or going over to using a competitive model? So, I know introduced the term MCP, and what does it mean in terms of model context protocol. I'm going to go a little bit deeper and explain why there's so much hype around this. And it's amazing. I mean, full disclosure, I never heard of MCP until a couple of weeks ago, and it just seems to be anywhere and everywhere, and anything that everybody wants to talk about in the quote unquote agent building community as of what seems to be the last 2 weeks. And it's like um, a ball rolling down the hill. It's just gaining more and more momentum, and there's more and more companies signing on to supporting the MCP framework, including Microsoft. Literally this past week, Microsoft put out support for the MCP, not only in our Foundry or AI Foundry, the platform, but also within Copilot Studio to build agents. So, it just seems like everybody is behind this now. So again, I go back to my comment that I made. If you can't join them, if you can't beat them, join them. That's kind of how I see, what OpenAI is doing, or has, put their support around MCP.
Yeah, and I think it was a smart move by Anthropic, of course, to make it a open source, because otherwise nobody would have adopted it. And a lot of companies are already using it: Block, Paolo, Replit, Codium, etc. And of course, when Microsoft actually joined the bandwagon last week, then I knew that okay, this is really gaining the ground. I briefly talked about it last episode as well, but I did not know that even OpenAI is going to adopt it. I think that's really a big one, and probably the biggest impetus to this protocol.
Yep. So let's get a little bit into what MCP is, and why there's so much hype. There's so much behind MCP. We could spend a whole episode just talking about it. So we've got other things to cover, but let me just give you some of the basics. So again, MCP stands for Model Context Protocol. It basically is exactly what you mentioned, Shadab. It's to help organizations connect into backend data, but it even does more than that. It allows companies through an open protocol to connect into backend services, data components, as well as external sources. So there's really a couple of different pillars, of what I would call key capabilities or features of MCP. And this is the important one. It's standardized communication in a structured way for these AI models. And again, could be OpenAI, could be the Anthropic models, to connect into these various different, what I'm going to call, tools. So the tools, in terms of access and the expansion, is that these models can now connect into those various different things with real-time insights. So again, and the model itself, when you think about agents, those things need to do something. They need to act on things. They need to work with different data. So now with a standardized communication protocol, they can connect into a wide variety of different things, as long as that provider has created an MCP shell to be able to use it. So a couple of key features around this is secure and scalable. While it is a key feature for integration with enterprise applications, in my opinion, there's a couple of shortcomings with MCP. I'll kind of hit that at the end. I don't think it's anything that's not going to be addressed. The roadmap on MCP, I'm sure, will handle it over time, but the security aspect of this is still in its infancy stages. I'll leave it at that. So, from OpenAI, we already mentioned that, it's available today via the Agents SDK. And right now it's supported through the Chat GPT desktop. And the support for the Responses API is coming shortly. Shortly could be, next couple of days, knowing Sam Altman, or it could be, another couple of months, but it is coming. And as we talked about last episode, I think, or maybe the one before that, the Responses API is the newest API, which is going to, it's basically the superset of the chat completions API. So that's where you would do it. Now, not to be outdone, and you can see from the slide that I have up here, is when you think about what MCP is, and here's why I say there needs to be work that needs to be created. So this MCP is actually a hosted environment that runs under Python. So there needs to be some setup in a server environment. So it's actually almost like you're connecting into this hub. And this is why I use this sort of like this universal USB connector. Someone's got to create that hub. So if you, and I don't have one of my USB hubs, I had it on my desk last night, but if you literally think about this hub, someone needs to program what that hub's doing. So a provider, whether or not it's Microsoft or if it's something like ServiceNow, they need to create the instantiation of this MCP host. So this is where the communications goes back and forth between the AI model, the client, which is going to make requests to this MCP server. And here's the piece that someone needs to stand up. It's that MCP server, which is going to expose the capabilities, whether it's APIs, databases, files, whatever it may be, to be able to communicate with those other MCP clients. So what that also means, and it's a subtle notion that I just mentioned there, is you need something that understands how to talk to MCP. Now, as I said before, we could spend a whole episode just on this. It's not, at least right now, in order to use MCP, you're going to have to do some coding to be able to speak to, the servers, and you have to have the host and the client that can accept those things. Now, providers are making it easier to do that, and this is why we mentioned up front that Microsoft just jumped into this game this past week. So Microsoft is putting out two different pieces. So one is MCP integration inside of the Azure AI Agent Service. And this allows us to create, again, this common language for connectivity back into these dynamic agents that will enable knowledge, connection, tool use, whatever is built within that MCP host. The other thing, too, is that Microsoft did just put out this last week MCP support inside of Copilot Studio. So if you're a pro code developer, you've got it within Azure AI Agent Service, as well as within Copilot Studio to support MCP. So again, pick your flavor and how you want to actually build things. You could do it either in this low code or pro code scenario. So that's the real promise of MCP. Let me share out a quick website just to show you how quickly this has come up in use slash what's available out there. So
yeah, I think this is a really very beneficial. Like people who use Azure AI Foundry regularly, they know that they can go there and they have like pre-built integrations with, let's say, Fabric, data lakes, and other systems, etc. Azure AI Search, and they can do it. But that's all just within the Microsoft ecosystem, right? But if you want to integrate with the other external system, that's where actually MCP will become easy. I think it's like a data as a service on the protocol to be used by the AI application. That's what it will enable.
Yeah, and I do want to preface that it's not just data; it's any API. I mean, ultimately, the APIs are going to expose data, but it would be through some API gateway to communicate with a application. So there's no limit on what you can do or build. So what I'm hitting right now, what I'm sharing, is the GitHub environment for the MCP servers. Again, this is all open source and it's all up on GitHub. Now, if you look at this, we'll put this link in the show notes. It explains, the reference servers. So I can hit, Postgres. I can hit Google Drive, Google Maps. But if you look at these third-party servers, I mean, this list just goes on and on and on and on. So these are already the third-party community servers. This list is kind of long, so they break it down. But these are all of the organizations that have already built MCP servers. So if you have an agent that you're constructing and want to speak to something like BigQuery, right? You can do that. Again, BigQuery is a database engine under Google for, obviously big data. So you could see this list is quite long, but there's a lot of existing connections that could be used, and there's more and more that are popping up on this, seems like every day. So that's why I just wanted to point out that it's a growing community of organizations, tools that are supporting this MCP concept for building agents.
Awesome. Okay, and how difficult it is, Jimmy? Let's say some provider, whoever has the data, document, information, and they want to provide it and enable this. How long does it take? And how difficult it is for somebody to enable and make their application MCP compatible?
So, if you read the documentation, it reads pretty quick. It is programming. So you need to use something like, Python to create a host and connect into that host. Now, here's where I was talking about before, that there's some, how should I say, there's some potential issues. It's not all rosy. So there is a complexity inherently involved with implementing the MCP. It's not trivial. It's somewhat substantial. Now, yeah, there's examples that are out there, but it actually does require, not just one or two lines of code that you need to write, but potentially, tens, if not hundreds of lines of code to implement this. Now, compounding that even more, there's not that, at least not yet. And again, as I said before, I think this will all change as a roadmap with MCP, but there's limited testing options for looking at what you're actually building with it. There's also constraints in terms of where these things can run. They need to run within a host application. So it's almost like you're putting another layer of technology in between your agent and your data, rather than just going directly to an API, which I can code for with these SDKs. The problem is I have to code for each individual API. So the thought is that, all right, as long as I could speak to MCP, my agents can do that. All right, well, that sounds great, but now I have these host MCP servers. So as I said, it's putting in another layer of technology. And what that means to me is now I got to worry about another layer for performance impact, as well as, are there going to be any compatibility issues with the said services that I'm going to be running within that host? Again, I go back to, it's not trivial to actually set up an MCP host, given the fact that, you need the node environment. It's got, do you have all the right dependencies actually set up? So again, it goes down that path. The other thing that I would say, again, probably will be addressed over time, but there certainly are some security considerations to be aware of. So, you have to think about the various different threat vectors that could intersect your communication. So, simple things like prompt injection hacks could be looked at. And, you got to just think about how you're actually securing that host server. So again, I say there's some caveats here. Will it be addressed? Yeah. How long? Don't know, but you should be aware of that as you start to build an MC application.
Yeah, and since this is an open source project, so it's not just Anthropic who is, who has an obligation to actually do these things, what Jamie is talking about. It's an open source, so I'm sure the other parties will also step up and start contributing to it and develop those things. But yeah, I mean, like, since it pertains to data, right, whether it's information, document, or actually the data in the databases or stored, it is going to be sensitive. So safety and security is going to be absolutely of paramount importance. Otherwise, this could become a vulnerability, right? So, um, but yeah, it's so far on the good track, I think. So, hopefully, so far the news has been positive. Hopefully, it doesn't get into a negative news.
Yep.
We need to address those aspects quickly. All right. Let's talk about quick some of the commercial news, right? In terms of what the companies are doing and how they are monetizing their AI. The company Cursor, who provides an amazing, the programming platform using AI, and they said they just hit the $200 million in now annualized revenue, right? So that's amazing, right? I mean, it's the speed at which, like within a year, Cursor hitting an annualized revenue of 200 million, right? I mean, I know companies like who have existed for 20 years and they still haven't crossed the $100 million mark. So it's
Yep.
unbelievable, right? The space at which you can monetize if you have the right offering. And in the other news, OpenAI is also on track to actually $12 billion annualized revenue. This is far more than $3 billion that we were talking last year. This is just incredible pace of growth.
Yep.
Uh, and some accounting jugglery by XAI acquiring X. So that's just one pocket to another. But it's interesting to see, right? I mean, the XAI acquiring X, not the other way.
Yeah. When
That
I when I
absolutely.
saw that, yeah, when I saw that news pop in my phone, I'm like, I must be reading this wrong. So yeah, it was interesting, to say the least.
But yeah, I mean, like it's like right now Meta owning Meta AI, and it goes the other direction in a few years, and Meta AI becomes a company, and then it owns all the Meta platforms, right? So we'll see how things emerge, but this is an indication of AI actually eating the world, really, of the software. Um, anyway, let's move on to the launches, Jamie. There are some viral launches actually this week, and starting with the 4o image generation. That has gone viral, right? I mean, that's one of the things that again has surpassed the expectation, even from OpenAI's own expectation benchmark. That they thought that it was good, but they did not think that it would go so viral. And Jimmy, a couple of weeks ago, you actually talked about the image generation, native image generation in Gemini, right? And we talked about it, how good it is, and how good it holds the text, right? I mean, because that has been a challenge. Our own logo, AI Files logo, was actually generated by the Dolly, and you can see that how good it is. In fact, we use the Copilot as well to generate these images. And the tax has been a very difficult thing, right? It's been very, very difficult. I tried to generate a lot of those versions, and most of them, the visual parts look good, but the text wasn't right, and then it becomes a problem to edit them. And then we saw the image generation, native image generation in Gemini, which was amazing because it was holding text well. And now this new image generation natively in the GPT-4o, it's not Dolly, right? So this is amazing, right? I mean, the images that we see, the fidelity to the text is amazing. The ability to actually hold the text prompt and then do it accordingly is incredible. And the way it renders, right, it goes kind of a streaming, like you can see that it starts from top to down, like in terms of the image is rendering. It's not like a single step. It develops, and then kind of a recursive loop in sophisticating that image actually. So it takes that feedback from the other portion of the image, and then it continuously develop that. So it takes a little bit time. Sometimes some of the images can take even up to a minute to actually generate, but the ability is incredible. Like for example, it also can actually handle up to 10-20 different objects in the image very, very successfully, unlike the other system that even struggle with the 5 to 8 objects. You can also refine images through the natural conversation. Let's say if you have some older pictures, etc., you want to make them better, you can sharpen them, etc., through the natural conversation. You can actually have as I said, right, I mean, the text, you can kind of create comics, right, entire strips actually you can create using this. And there are some great examples in the LinkedIn universe. You can find tons of posts about how people have done it. And what I also found is that some good stuff in terms of they have actually made sure that it comes with C2PA metadata, which is, like, I think I'm forgetting the full name, but the Content Provisioning Authority,
Yep.
which makes sure that the images that are being generated are recognized and identified with that watermark. And then they've also actually built an internal search tool which uses the technical attributes of generations to help verify if content come from their model. So you can actually validate with the OpenAI ChatGPT as well that if it was generated through that. So I think that's really good, because of course some of these can create confusion in the world as well.
Yeah, when you think about what they've done differently, because there's obviously been image generation capabilities if you've used ChatGPT, but if you didn't know, the way that was working previously was that it was actually taking part of your prompt and just sending it over to Dolly 3, which is a separate model. It's an older model for all intents and purposes, and it uses a diffusion method for creating images. What they did for this new image generation is it's built into GPT-4o. And the major distinction between that is that it now knows everything about what GPT-4o has been built upon. So it has all that context. And then it takes that into consideration when it builds the images. So that's the real change here. All the things you talked about as well in terms of what it can do. Now, that being said, there still are, is it perfect? No. I was doing some testing yesterday and this morning. I'll show you a couple of quick things, but it made some wrong things, like it cropped my image incorrectly. I also had some issues with how it was creating some graphing. I was trying something else with graphs, so it's not really good doing precise determination on graphs that you're creating. There are other issues, like it could hallucinate, just like GPT-4o can, right? So you got to make sure that you're validating and verifying the things that you're creating. It's also not that great at doing multilingual text rendering. So if you've got a need that has multiple languages that you're trying to put on an image, you could have some issues there. And then we didn't talk about it, but you could actually do editing within images. So if you're trying to do very minute changes, it may not do a great job at that. But, all being told, the capability that you're able to actually do, in my opinion, is mind-boggling for what I've seen thus far. And I think you already hit upon it. Like Sam said, they were blown away by the number of requests, the interest in this. The intent was to take it to the free versions, but their servers have literally been hit so hard because everyone is using this, maybe partly for creating those gimmick things, but there is a lot of demand is ultimately what I'm getting at. I even ran into that when I was doing some of the testing, because one of the images I was trying to create, it said, sorry, try again in 10 minutes because we're getting slammed. I'm kind of paraphrasing it, but that's basically what they were saying. So,
and for you to buy the pro version, Jamie.
Say again? Yeah, 10 Pro version.
The pro version.
So let me show you a couple of quick things on this image generation. So by the way, what I'm showing on the slide, I'm actually going to show you in real time for what was actually constructed or built. So this is directly off of the GPT-4o or OpenAI website. This is their example that they used. I took this exact prompt just to see how well it did, and it did create it. What was interesting is some of the cartoon panels are slightly different, but the wording is exactly the same. So you'll see what I mean in a minute. Let me just share out this slide or the my ChatGPT environment.
Yeah, and while you do that, I think one concern that has come up so far is that since this Ghibli style has gone viral, and people are talking like, okay, that means that it has been trained on that Ghibli content. Was it paid? Was it approved? And what else, right? I mean, what other content it has been trained on? Because now people can simply, recreate that kind of magic, that kind of effect, like the Ghibli effect. Where would that leave the artist, right? So I think it's kind of like, obviously those are very, very fair questions,
Yep.
and that kind of gets in the artistic world as well, that okay, how do they react to something like this?
Yep. So speaking of the Ghibli image, so as we were talking, I just went away on vacation in Jamaica. Totally perfect place, warm weather, awesome beach. This is me on the beach with my wife and my son. So this is the starting image. And that's the other thing too. You could give it images and say, create an image off of that likeness or piece. So you can see the simple little prompt. So here's the image that it came up with as far as the output. So I think it did pretty well with my son and my wife. I thought it put a little extra pounds on me.
You look more like Simpson style.
Yeah, no. That's what my son said, actually. So here, the reason why I put this up there, other than showing you the first one, is you could tell it to change the image. So I said, change the shirt color, keeping everything else the same. So I went from a white shirt to a whatever I said, a light pink shirt. So it made that change. And then I said, well, I think you made me a little bit heavier than I am. Can you reduce the thing by 10 or 15 pounds? Remember I told you that I got this temporary limit because they were just getting slammed. So
I think it was just polite. It didn't want to do that.
yeah. So it said try again, and it did. So here's the revised image. Maybe it doesn't look so much like me on this one, right? But it changed it, but it kept everything else the same with the individual pieces. So between changing the color of my shirt and slimming me down a little bit, that's the power of this thing. It's not just about creating this,
That's
this
amazing, right?
image, but think about the possibilities of taking an existing image that you have, asking GPT-4o to edit some of the parts in the image, and or just creating something from scratch. That's in the realm of possibility. Let me jump to the other one that I did.
Yeah, the fidelity to the other elements is pretty good. But I wonder now, in the last one, who is the son actually?
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah, I should have said make me a little bit older, right? So here's that exact prompt that is on the OpenAI site, and then here's the image that it created. So what's important here is it's showing the capability of putting text onto an image. So you could see, like, close-up snail. Like, I want your fastest sports car, and I want you to paint big letter S on it. So that's exactly what is being put onto the image, and you can see that here. So it didn't mess up on the text going into the image. And if you've ever tried to play around with image generation with other models, you know that this is, let's call it, frustrating at best. Some of the models are getting better, but this is by far and large the best image generation model that I've worked with, that just nailed the text representation directly on the image that it's being created. And if you go to the OpenAI site, they have a whole slew of examples of where they were putting text. They even have one where they created a menu with all of, like, the food choices, pricing, and all that stuff on the image itself. So I'm pretty impressed.
That's true. That's true. It's amazing actually, and the demo videos, etc., that they have shown, that launch video. The OpenAI team, Sam Altman himself, they were actually surprised by the results itself, right? So no wonder it's going viral, because it's just amazing.
Yep.
Okay, great. Moving on, Jimmy, what else? I think Google is also not sitting quiet.
Yeah. So yeah, Google is I kind of equate this excuse me. kind of equate this to an arms race where everyone's trying to one up each other on the models. So, as you know, Google has Gemini, and within Gemini is their various different model sets, and they've introduced a new model, which is the 2.5 family of models. Let me bring back up the slide set, and I think I killed it. Let me bring it back up again. So Gemini 2.5, it's their newest model. It's labeled as an experimental model, and this experimental model is usable. So it's actually launched. What this model actually is it's tracking against being able to do reasoning, but overlaying that reasoning capability into the general model itself. So it's got enhanced reasoning, which you would expect because it's being called the 2.5 Pro reasoning model. But it really does very well at being able to analyze information, coming up and drawing logical conclusions based upon data that it knows, based upon your prompt, as well as then its ability to create and make informed decisions. What is really impressive about this model is that it leads in the current benchmarks, at least for math and science, things like the AIME 2025, as well as the GPQA benchmarks. And it actually is scoring the most in the humanities last exam, which is a benchmark designed to capture the human frontier aligned with knowledge and reasoning. What's really good as well on Gemini 2.5 Pro is its ability to excel in coding. So I kind of look at who's the best model right now for coding. Hands down, it's the Anthropic 3.7 Sonnet model. It's kind of like the de facto. But when you look at the capabilities that this 2.5 Pro brings in for coding, at least in the benchmarks, it outperforms what 3.5 Sonnet actually is.
Is that 3.5 Sonnet? This is not 3.7 Sonnet.
Sorry.
Right?
Yeah, sorry, I meant 3.7. So yeah, it outperforms the 3.7 benchmark for coding. Haven't tried it yet on coding features, but I definitely plan to. So this 2.5, it's available in the Google AI Studio, as well as in the Gemini app for some of those advanced users. A couple of things too to note, it does have a 1 million token context window, and they on the website, they say soon to be 2 million. So, you think about it, you don't need to do any RAG patterns or most RAG patterns anymore. You can just stuff all that into the prompt token window to handle a lot of those complex tasks, especially when you think about what it may do as it relates to reasoning over that. So right now, there's no pricing for this, at least not that I've seen. What the Google mentions on their site is pricing will be announced or released once it gets closer to changing this into an experimental model into a full-fledged GA model. But I would assume it's going to be in line with, models like the O3 or Sonnet.
Because there are different spaces. One is a programming space where Anthropic has taken quite a lead. There are other spaces like agents where I feel that OpenAI has taken actually quite a bit of lead, and they are doubling down in that area. And then there are areas like multimedia generation, things like that, where I think both Google and OpenAI are, duking it out, in terms of those capabilities. So, but with this, it's Google trying to get into more of the programming space. Is that where they're heading? Because I think that's where Anthropic does really well, and even Microsoft's own GitHub Copilot and things like that. It also is pretty handy, and the company like Cursor. which uses models like Sonnet as well as the other models. So, interesting to see where does Google want to take itself ahead in the AI race.
Yeah, like I said, it's sort of like this ongoing arms race between the key AI labs. We see this leapfrog time and time again. Whether or not it's Gemini or Meta's Llama models or Claude or Anthropic Claude or OpenAI. I think we'll continue to see the boundary pushed on this, whether or not the focus is on language writing or the focus is on code or agent building. We'll certainly see over time. It kind of just re-mentioning that coding. There is a benchmark called Live Code Bench. It's on a V5 right now, and it scores very high. You have a single attempt, or what they call a single pass, or multiple pass on what is being generated, and it scores in line with the rest of the models. It's actually slightly below the OpenAI O3 mini model. What's interesting enough, there is no benchmark for Claude 3.7 Sonnet in this one, but I would assume it's fairly close. If someone might lead by a percentage or two here or there, but the bottom line is the Gemini 2.5 Pro leapfrogs what was available or capable within the 2.0 period for Gemini. Anyway, going back to, like I said, I'm sharing my screen here. Simple little demo. It's probably about 10 episodes ago or so, whenever it was, where I'm showing a couple of different prompts that I use for these reasoning models. I think I actually used this one against Grok. But if you like to gamble and like to play blackjack, this is a very simple one. Playing blackjack casino. If I'm showing 5 or 6 and the dealer shows 6, what are the odds if I win, if I double down? So it goes through its reasoning. So I could expand this view. I could see what it thought along the way in terms of the reasoning. So pretty in depth here, obviously. A lot of different steps, but then it broke it down and it gave me the output for what it sees. And again, I read through this, and I'll be taking this to Atlantic City, I guess, shortly. But this does a really good job at determining, what are the strategies and what it should do. So nothing dissimilar to what I would think that it shouldn't do, but just proving out that it does what it should. What I do like is the level of depth that it's showing in the reasoning. This just definitely looks a little bit better than the Grok model that it was originally doing. And I think I used this one also against the DeepSeek R1 model as well. So like I said, you could use this through the AI Studio, and it'll be coming to the developer platforms as well.
This is not fair, Jamie. Are you sure casinos allow the reasoning model?
You might get flagged and they might kick you out, but that's for a different show, I guess.
True. Okay, great. In other news, PwC, one of the big 4 companies, they actually launched a new platform to help AI agents work together across different platforms. So, they're doubling down on the agentic space. And what they say is that, there are agents everywhere and from everyone, Microsoft, Anthropic, OpenAI, and everywhere. And the data also sits across everywhere. So they say that they have developed this agent OS, which actually helps the agents orchestration across these agents and the platforms. And it's cloud agnostic, it's a platform agnostic. So you can build. It lets you build the agents, you can customize them, and they can connect with each other and automate the complex tasks, and they can work with each other. They can learn from each other in the real time as well. And this is like a platform. So it's up and running in a client's environment, and they can roll out a multi-agent solution in just a couple of weeks. Typically what happens is that the companies use the agentic solutions, like let's say in the Microsoft ecosystem, but then of course they work with each other only, right? But if you have the agents across the platform, some from OpenAI and Microsoft and let's say the Anthropic and the Google, and there are tons of agents like Salesforce agent, etc. And you want them to orchestrate and work with each other. That's what PwC says that their platform actually helps them do that. And particularly, for example, like this is a unified from framework to build, customize, and orchestrate AI agents across the multiple platforms, SDKs, and the enterprise environments. It also enables the integration with existing enterprise systems and platforms like data sources and agents. It also actually helps you govern them, right? So there is an AI governance and compliance through PwC's own integrated risk management and oversight frameworks, which actually helps you govern that entire multi-agentic system. And then, of course, it allows a collaboration because it allows the AI agents to work together and then learn from each other in the real time and to handle complex cross-functional workflows. So that's how it is. And as an example, right, let's say they give some example like a compliance manager at a multinational bank could actually use the automate regulatory workflows using the PwC agent OS to integrate the policy analysis agents, let's say from Anthropic, or the internal documentation review agents powered by Microsoft Azure. And this custom agent will interpret the evolving regulations and ensure the alignment within the company standards. And it could this setup could reduce the manual review time by, let's say, 70%, right? So this is kind of an example they're giving. So I think it's an interesting idea. And I think if but it is contingent upon one thing, right? Are the companies going to use the multi-agent solutions, or are they going to rely on like just one, let's say, platform, let's say all within Microsoft Azure and mostly? So I think it would depend on whether a company would need a framework like this or not. Let's say a company does most of it. Let's say it's a Microsoft shop. They have Dynamics. They have the AI Foundry. They're using most of the systems from Microsoft. In that case, Agent OS probably not as much of a value, but a larger company which works across could find it very valuable.
Yeah, and I think this is the important part is integrating different agents together. I know there's some other tools on the market that claim to be able to do this as well, but there's stitching, coding work to enable that. So this seems like a platform that will make this easier. And I know a lot of companies that, as you said, may be entrenched in one platform or another, whether or not it's Google or if it's Microsoft or whatever the case may be, and what you're building your agents under. But there's third-party systems that may have already built agents on another platform. A great example is Salesforce with Agentforce. Well, that's probably not your only system or tool that you have, but what if you built something, let's say, like a whole series of agents under Microsoft? Well, how do you connect those two together, and how do you do that easily? So this seems like a solution that will actually help for those large organizations that do have those multiple agent platforms and need to stitch together. The other thing too is, what if there's agents that are created and are working between companies? So there could be scenarios where you've got business to business or partnerships, and you need different agents to work together. Maybe this is another platform play for the Agent OS via PwC.
Mm-hmm. That's true. Okay, and from the Azure and Microsoft space, let's talk about some of the launches and from them as well. Anthropic, state-of-the-art model, which is a Cloud 3.7 Sonnet, pretty good model, is now actually available within the Databricks natively. So Databricks user can actually use that model natively within the Databricks platform to do whatever they want to do on the data. Now, since Microsoft also has a first-party product called Azure Databricks, which is, of course, built on the Databricks, but it is actually maintained by Azure, which is unlike the other offerings, right? I mean, the other cloud like AWS and GCP, you can have these Databricks virtually hosted on the VMs, etc. But Azure Databricks is unlike those. Azure Databricks is first-party product from Microsoft, which Microsoft manages that. But since it is based on the Databricks, now that means that the Sonnet will also be available within the Azure Databricks. And Azure Databricks is part of a wider framework, what Microsoft calls as Microsoft Intelligent Data Platform, MIDP. And MIDP includes, Azure Databricks, it includes Synapse, it includes databases, it includes Fabric, which means that within the Microsoft world, now you have a direct access to using the Sonnet as well. Only thing is that you need to also use Azure Databricks. And let's say if you're a Fabric customer, right, and you don't use Azure Databricks, Fabric and Azure Databricks also go very well together. There is a hybrid architecture and pattern of implementation that you can use both together. In fact, better together story exists between Databricks and Microsoft platform very well. So you can easily spin Azure Databricks within your platform, even if you're a heavy Microsoft user, and then you can use Sonnet if you really want to use it. Because some of the customers have said, okay, we want more choices. Like, yes, it's great to have actually Azure OpenAI, which is an exclusive only to Azure. But then what about, let's say, if we can get Anthropic as well? Now with this, kind of a backdoor to get you the Sonnet as well on the Azure. And I
Yeah,
think with that, it opens a lot of options now on the Azure platform, Jamie.
yeah, and that's exactly what I was about to say. I mean, it's all about choice. You don't want to be locked into any given model. As I mentioned, some of these companies leapfrog each other, but some stand out for what their capabilities are. As I mentioned already, the Claude 3.7 Sonnet model, it's really good at coding. And if you want to use that, now there's an opportunity to use that Claude model inside of the Microsoft Azure ecosystem.
Yep.
So some other news coming out from Microsoft as it relates to agents is, at least in this case, the first one is around the Microsoft 365 Copilot world. So there's two agents that were released or announced this past week. One is Researcher, or a researcher agent. What's similar to this is if you think about OpenAI and deep research, Google has their research capability. Same thing, Grok came out with it as well. Perplexity's got theirs. So now that same functionality comes to M365 Copilot with a quote unquote click on a button and it takes you to the research. So this helps with those complex multi-step research tasks, which take in huge amounts of information. What's different about this is, yes, it could pull from the web and pull from different sources, but since this is connected to M365, it's connected to the Microsoft Graph, which means it could pull from research that is within your tenant within your organization, meaning emails, Word docs, PowerPoints, things that live up on SharePoint. So it'll pull that information as research or information that goes into that research. So, examples of where this could be useful, obviously go-to-market strategies. It could identify white space opportunities based upon customers. It can create obviously comprehensive reports based upon data that it sees. The use cases are pretty much endless in my opinion. So this research agent, as well as the Analyst one, which I'll talk about in a minute, they are coming out basically by the time you watch this, probably it will be out. It's supposed to be out on April 1st, and that is not an April Fool's joke. It will be rolling out though, based upon region. So your mileage may vary when you actually see this if you are an M365 Copilot user. So with that, let's roll a quick demo.
Hi, I'm Ashok, and I'm excited to show you our new researcher agent in Copilot. Recent advances in LLMs allow AI to contribute like a team member. We've taken one of these models, OpenAI's O3 Deep Research, along with advanced orchestration in Copilot and deep search algorithms, and optimized it for work. The data you use every day. That's all your emails, meetings, files, chats, and more. Let's take a look. Now, let's say I work in product development and we're entering a new market. So I need help developing a product strategy for our expansion. I enter my prompt and researcher gets to work. It asks clarifying questions as a seasoned colleague would and uses my response to move forward. The agent takes my prompt, understands the task, and constructs a plan to reach an answer. You'll notice it reasoning over all of my work data in the Microsoft Graph, not just one file. Here, we can see its chain of thought reasoning. You'll see it working through the problem in real time. It builds an understanding of my product lineup, references recent meetings, and even pulls industry updates from the web. This process takes a few minutes, so let's jump ahead to the result. I got a really thorough response, in line with what I'd expect from a researcher on my own team. I can edit it in Pages where I can bring in my team to collaborate. What we just saw was built on the Microsoft Graph and the web. But Researcher can also be connected to third-party data via connectors and can leverage other agents, like the sales agent, to connect to its rich data and access its logic. Only Copilot knows what matters to you at work, and Researcher taps into that. It knows what's most recent and what files and data and meetings are most relevant to you. With Researcher, now every employee has access to expertise on demand.
Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah, I was just about to say, and blown away with the capabilities that are being rolled into Copilot or M365 Copilot. This Researcher one is certainly one of those that are, a great tool. And as I mentioned before, it pulls from the data that is not only within the Microsoft Graph, but also from the web. So let's talk about the next one, which is the Analyst. So this is the Analyst agent inside of M363, M365 Copilot. Yeah, say that one 5 times fast. So what this does, it basically brings a skilled data scientist into your work life without having to be a data scientist. So behind the scenes, this is actually doing advanced data analysis with chain of thought reasoning to provide high quality insights based upon the data. What's really going on behind the scenes is that it's running Python for those complex data analysis, those complex data queries. So, think about this in terms of use case. If you send a whole bunch of data, like give it, a series of Excel or CSV files, and you say, I need to go look at X, where that could be, demand forecasting. It could be, visualizing customer purchasing patterns, or it could be doing revenue projections. I mean, the use cases are really endless here. This is what the analyst can do. So, in my opinion, what this is it's bringing the code interpreter connected now inside of M365 Copilot, but it's using a reasoning engine coupled with that. I believe it's the O3 model. It's either O1 or O3, or soon will be O3. But same way that we just went through a video demo going through Researcher, let's roll another demo for, in this case, the M365 Copilot Analyst agent.
I'm Ashok, and I'm here today to show you our new Analyst agent in Copilot. We built Analyst to think like a skilled data scientist, so you can go from raw data to insights in minutes. Analyst leverages a state-of-the-art reasoning model that we've optimized for advanced data analysis at work. It's based on OpenAI's O3 Mini. Now, let's see the agent in action. Imagine I'm in marketing. I'm trying to understand our most loyal customers. I have this really messy data set. You can see thousands of rows and a few tabs across customers and their monthly revenue, and none of it has been cleaned or contextualized. Usually, to make sense of this data, I'd need to ask my colleague who knows Python. But let's try the Analyst agent. I don't have to spend time writing the perfect prompt to get what I'm looking for. I'll just ask it to help me come up with an easy way to learn and visualize my customer base. You'll see the agent takes my question, understands the task, and constructs a plan to reach an answer. It also identifies the Python tools it may need to complete the task, just as a data analyst would. It can take any complex data set, make sense of it, and execute Python code to reason through the questions you have about the data. If I want to see more into its thought process, I can always click and see its chain of thought reasoning, as well as the Python code it's running in real time. This allows me to validate and trust in its thinking and approach. Analyst is already on to the final step and starts working on a visualization. Now I've got the answer I was looking for. With Analyst, now every employee has access to their own 24/7 data analyst. It knows Python, it's right within Copilot, and it uses chain of thought reasoning so you can check its work.
Oh, this is cool as well, Jamie.
Yeah.
And I think this is actually a good example of because what I've seen in our corporate world, many customers kind of asking that, okay, hey, I don't want to go to the different systems to do things. If Copilot is my landing page, give me all these integrations with the Copilot. Like even like if I'm using Fabric, I want to use the Fabric agent and the other agent all within the Copilot. So I think Copilot as the UI of AI, as Microsoft says it, I think with all these agents integration, it could as well be, right? I mean, it could become a landing page for the organization, and then people will just start from there, and all the agents integration can happen from there. Um, I think this is a good example of more and more complex capabilities within the Copilot allows people to actually start from there.
Yeah, and it's really fulfilling the quote unquote tagline of Copilot being the UI for AI. So, having these additional tools where you don't have to jump out and go somewhere else, or being able to run quote unquote these agents, just makes that a reality now. And, even more so as additional agents get introduced into the Copilot ecosystem. So I know that that's not it as it relates to agents. We just focused on the M365 Copilot and those two new agents, that being researcher and analyst, but there's agents now being introduced into Copilot Studio, which again is to build agents. So do you want to give us a little insight on at least the first one, and I'll take the last one.
Yeah, like the Copilot Studio. So, and just to clarify to some of the users, like Copilot Studio is basically the low-code, no-code platform to build the agents. It's in modern version of what used to be a Power Virtual Agents system, PVA, and it allows you to actually do a lot of those things in a very easy way, right? I mean, anybody can use it, right? It's a as I define it, right? You don't need to be a developer to build the agents anymore. You can do that within the Copilot Studio. So amazing stuff within the Copilot Studio that's happening. A lot of customers I know now actually are pivoting to use the Copilot Studio as a primary platform to build the agents. Of course, for the more complex and multi-agentic kind of system, you have to go to the AI Foundry and ProDev experience. But for the makers, the Copilot Studio is the UI. Now, within that, Microsoft actually launched some new capabilities like the deep reasoning. And deep reasoning is essentially, just based on the reasoning ability. Now, simply you can use advanced reasoning models connected to the enterprise data, and now it uses the O family series. I believe it's right now O1, but it could be O3 as well soon. And it uses those reasoning models to actually perform. Now, the way it works is you don't have to pick the model to actually say, okay, let me use the O1 or O3, etc. within those Copilot Studio. Essentially, you can in the prompt say that, okay, like use the reasoning, right? Or you have to use a trigger word actually called reason, and then it will automatically actually integrate the reasoning model in the process, and that's how actually it provides the output. So you can use it for things like demand forecasting, supply chain optimization kind of applications, and it will use the advanced reasoning model within the agent. But the way it is done so simply by just providing a trigger word, reason, I think that's a very easy thing to do rather than having to pick and like having to pick a model or do something else to do that. And
Yeah, and I was just going to say, again, if you've used Copilot Studio, this is based upon the generative answers. The important thing is what you just mentioned is that, yes, you can use this deep reasoning, but the orchestrator inside of Copilot Studio is going to be smart enough to know based upon your prompt. So it's basically digesting or dissecting your prompt to say, is this simple enough where I just need to use the GPT-4o model? or do I need the reasoning model O1 to be used in that case? So it's almost like a prelude, in my opinion, to what we may get with GPT-5o, because that model will actually have the ability to say, do I need to do the reasoner, or can I keep with the general transformer-based model? So
True.
to me, that's pretty impressive with what is capable, soon, because
Yeah.
this is currently in preview, I believe. It'll start rolling out, shortly. But to me,
And,
it's pretty impressive.
and picture speaks 1,000 words, Jamie, but the demo speaks probably 10,000. So here is a quick demo of this deep reasoning capability. Check it out.
Imagine your team receives frequent requests for proposals, or RFPs, from clients. The RFP requires extensive collaboration, timely information access, and high-quality responses to win the deal. Agents in Copilot Studio can help your team complete an ambiguous or multi-part process like an RFP. You can use deep reasoning in Copilot Studio and instruct the agent to create formal responses to an RFP. Just provide the details in natural language. For example, you can tell the agent to use CRM data and product information stored across various files in SharePoint to find answers to your client's questions. All you have to do is instruct the agent to use reasoning in order to incorporate the advanced model into the process. Then connect your knowledge sources, select actions, and add triggers that the agent will use to draft the RFP. Now that the agent is set up, you can test the agent trigger to validate that it's running correctly. And watch the agent's process in real time as it selects the most appropriate steps to write the RFP. You can see deep reasoning in action as the agent analyzes large amounts of data to generate precise and well-thought-out responses for the client. And you're done. Now, as soon as an RFP arrives in your inbox, the autonomous agent will send a first draft in Teams so that the team can collaborate and get back to their customer sooner. Easily build agents that complete processes for you using your enterprise data and deep reasoning in Copilot Studio.
Yeah, that's powerful stuff. I mean, what is now capable within Copilot Studio, to be able to do this deep reasoning just ups the game, or ups the level of what is capable to be built within the low code scenarios for agent building.
Okay, I want more agent, Jamie. Talk
We
more.
got it. Yeah, we got it for you. So within Copilot Studio, again, there is another agentic capability, and this is actually create what's called agent flows. The way that I looked at this when I first saw it is, if you're familiar with the Power Platform world within Microsoft, there's something called Power Automate, which allows you to build, workflows based upon, hey, I got the starting point, I need to do X, Y, and Z. So instead of going directly into Power Automate and you filling out what that workflow is, the agent flow can build that for you. So again, based upon a prompting, this will allow the Copilot Studio to automatically create that agent flow based upon what is deemed necessary by the various different components that are within the structure, not only of your agent, but what you're telling it or asking it to do. So to me, this is really good for thinking about applications such as document processing, financial approvals, compliance tasks, anything that you need that workflow. Well, you could do that by this task execution that you do not have to create. The agent flow will create for you. Let's, as an old sportscaster used to say, let's roll the tape. So there's another demo video that will explain and show what agent flows are within Copilot Studio.
Copilot Studio is where you build agents. Now you can also use it to build agent flows to automate your business processes in a predictable way. Say that you want to triage customer feedback. You can build an agent flow for this. Just write what you want in natural language and watch Copilot build the flow, complete with actions. Next, review which data sources are connected. Then click Create. In seconds, your agent flow is ready. Once feedback comes in, it will summarize the feedback and direct it to the right place. You can see how your flow is summarizing feedback by providing a prompt that categorizes feedback as it comes in. You can choose the right model for the summary from a selection of over 1,800 models and test it out to see how it categorized feedback before returning to your flow. You can now add an Outlook action so that the right team automatically receives an email with the customer feedback. Once you're done, publish the flow and test it out. But that's not all. You can also add pre-existing flows to an agent to consistently and quickly triage customer feedback. Now, your agent is ready to help you and your customers sooner.
Cool. Again, more amazing stuff. It just makes it easier to orchestrate and manage actually these agentic flows and triage right between the different agents and the capabilities.
Yep. Yeah, it's very powerful stuff. Speaking of powerful, just one other quick note. Copilot Studio had the ability to create something called autonomous agents. That functionality just went generally available. So, this is the concept there is there's built-in triggers. How do you leverage those triggers to manage tasks, to enhance business processes? So that capability just went GA.
Awesome. Yeah, it moves fast. And I want to actually give an example of Jimmy, how the AI is, we talk about a lot of these capabilities, but I think we also need to give some examples of how it is making real-time impact within the corporate world as well, right? How it is changing the experience and the productivity, etc. And one of the examples just recently published this week, actually. Here is an example of Japan Airlines new AI app, which is actually built on Microsoft 5.4 small language model, and it makes it easier for cabin attendants to report in-flight events. Because what happens is typically on any flight, generally, I mean, things can go wrong and there are unplanned incidents that could happen, like a sick passenger and the long delays, etc. And that requires follow-up. That there could be next action, there could be follow-ups, etc. And even when the flight lands next time, you want to make sure that it is handed over to the next flight attendant or whatever. So that means that the senior cabin attendant, they actually have to write up notes generally. And it can take time. It can take up to an hour for complex situation, or at least 30 minutes for a simple, right? You have to write in detail. And some of the attendants actually they do, I think, probably even more than necessary, right? So I mean, they like, everybody's writing style is different. So some write shorter and some write longer. It's just like appraisal, right? So now the thing is that it takes attention away. That's the main problem. It is already, flight is a very time bound duration, and then in that the attendants are busy all the time to make sure everything is on time. And on top of that, if some situation happens, then somebody has to devote their time to write up the note. They can't defer that as well. They have to do that within the flight. So it just takes and it's unplanned. So and the problem is that some of these, you can now enable the AI app to actually do this for them, right? To, like, just like it helps the doctors to write up the notes, it can also help the cabin attendants easily, right? So this app, the JAL AI app that Japan Airlines has developed, what it does is it actually allows the cabin attendants to actually interact with the app, and it asks the interactive question, right? It gives them the option and give me the keywords like, okay, sick passenger, seat number this, that's it, right? Give the small pieces of information, and then it creates those summary, and it will ask follow-up questions, so that it's a guided process for the attendants, and so that they can finish it as quickly as possible. And that's why they're able to do that. Like 60 minutes becomes 20 minutes, 30 minutes become 10 minutes. So it's a huge reduction of the time, and it's very productive for those cabin attendants. Now, the thing is that, however, many times while there is a Wi-Fi in the flight as well, but there are areas and the spots, right, during on the ramp, for example, etc., where there is no Wi-Fi connectivity. So you cannot just rely on the cloud connection for the app to actually work. And that's why what they've done is they've actually used a small language model like 5.4, because this can work offline. It doesn't need the cloud connect. It is so small that it can exist on the devices. And that's what the beauty of the SLMs are, that they can be on the edge, operating like this, and it actually helps them do it. And small language model, the other beauty of small language model is also that the fine tuning is also a smaller process. It's a shorter process. It can be fine tuned more easily with this lesser amount of data. And this one is like fine tuned using just 100 previous reports for accuracy. So I think it's a great example of how the SLMs can be used in the real time applications.
Yeah, I think it's an awesome example. I mean, there's so many different ways that AI could be utilized in various different use cases, and this is one I wouldn't even thought about. Let alone I didn't even know that the stewardesses or the flight attendants were actually creating reports. So that's a new fact that I just learned. But yeah, this is a great example of applying Gen AI to reduce the overall time that people take, because I'm assuming, just like anybody else, like once their shift is done, the last thing that they want to do is spend another hour writing reports.
Exactly. And not just shift is done, because they have to do it in time, because there could be action, right? I mean, in fact, I've gone through a situation when I was once sick and I actually had to deplane, right? And that means of course, that there was some delays because of that. And then, like they had to write up the notes, etc. And it will hold up a lot of things. And of course, because there were a lot of attendants actually then directing towards me, etc. So that takes attention away, that takes a time away. And sometimes the actions are also time bound, right? They have to like inform, okay, provide a wheelchair when we're landing, things like that, or the other actions. So they cannot even defer it. They have to do it first. It's a priority. But then interruptions keep happening. The some other, let's say the two unplanned issues happen, right? So it's like it's just doing it on the edge and much faster really helps those attendants. And we all will appreciate less grumpy attendants, to be honest. So it will help, I think.
Yep. No, it's a great use case.
Awesome. I think that pretty much wraps up the week. A lot of stuff, but I think I hope our viewers and the listeners will find it very useful. And by the way, I'm also going to be celebrating Eid tomorrow. So whoever is observing, Eid Mubarak. And tons of things. Jamie showed a lot of demos. Those are all amazing stuff. If you have access to Copilot Studio, the Gemini or the GPT-4o, play with it. It was great.
Yeah. So once again, thanks everybody for listening, watching, and look forward to seeing you next episode.
Bye, everyone.
Good
Jai. Talk soon.